In this video, I'll show you how to play BORD. I've already set up the islands and objectives as shown in the rulebook. These are islands. This is an island, and this is an island. There are 8 objectives. This is an objective, this is also an objective, this is one. Some are light and some are dark. I've also set up the scoreboard. There are 4 counters on the scoreboard. These counters are action points. One player is light and the other is dark. These are action points, whereas these are victory points. Victory points go up, whereas action points go down as you play. At the beginning of the game, you have 9 action points and 0 victory points. Four objectives are light, and the other 4 are dark. But they can be flipped from light to dark, or dark to light. You control an objective if your side is face up. You earn at least 1 victory point for each objective you control at the end of each season. The game is played over 2 seasons, summer and winter. Some objectives are worth 2 victory points in summer, and others are worth 3 victory points in winter instead of just 1. There are 4 steps that you have to take on each of your turns. In step 1, if you have less than 6 armies, you draw 2 armies and discard 1. At the beginning of the game, you have 0 armies, and so you draw 2 armies and discard 1 on your first turn. All armies have 2 sides, dark and light. When you draw your armies, you place them on the table with your side face up. You then discard 1 of them. In step 2, you spend 1 or 2 squares. Squares are action points. You spend 1 or 2 action points. If you cannot, your turn ends. If you spend 1, then you may, in any order, land and either move or battle. Either move or battle, but not both. If you spend 2, then you may land and move and battle. When an army is on the table, it's at sea. This army is at sea. You'll often spend 1 action point, and then you'll land. Choose one of your armies at sea, and place it on a shore, a half-hex that does not have an army on it. There are different types of hexes. Half-hexes are shores. Whole hexes are not shores. Whole hexes are high ground if they have dashed lines, or low ground if they don't. These are shores, this is high ground, and this is low ground. You can't land here, but you can land here or here because these are shores. So you'll choose one of your armies at sea and place it on a shore, a half-hex, that does not have an army on it. When an army is on a half-hex or a whole hex, it's on land. It's not at sea, it's on land. To land, you place your army on a shore, here, or maybe here. And that may be all you do in step 2. You do not have to move or battle, but you may do so. We'll talk about moving and battling later. In step 3, you may settle. You do not have to, you may. We'll talk about settling later. In step 4, you check to see if you have the most armies adjacent to any objectives. If you do, then you flip them so that your side is face up. Then your turn ends and the other player takes their turn. In step 1, they draw 2 armies and discard 1. In step 2, they spend 1 action point to land and move. To move, you choose one of your armies on land and move it onto an adjacent space up to 3 times. In this example, they move it only 2 times, 2 spaces. In step 3, they choose not to settle. We'll talk about settling later. And in step 4, they take control of these 2 objectives. Then it's your turn again. You have 1 army, which is less than 6, so you draw 2 armies. Each army has a bonus, an objective, and a name. Different armies have different symbols. X is +1 die to roll in battle. Circle is +1 victory point. Square is +1 action point. When your army is adjacent to the objective shown on it, you get the bonus shown on it. Here you're choosing between armies with different bonuses or different objectives. On this turn, you want to land and move and battle, so you have to spend 2 action points. Not 1 action point, but 2 action points to land and move and battle. You land here and move here. To battle, you choose an enemy army on land. The battleground is the space that army is on. So this is the battleground. Each player rolls 1 die for each of their armies on or adjacent to the battleground, plus their bonus dice. This army is on the battleground. This army is adjacent to it, so each player rolls 1 die. This army has an X, and it's adjacent to its objective, so you get plus 1 die. It's also on high ground, not low ground, but high ground. High ground has dashed lines. You get plus 1 die to roll when your army is on high ground, and plus 1 die to roll when it's adjacent to a stronghold you control. This army is adjacent to a stronghold they control, so they get plus 1 die. You get plus 1 die for high ground, and plus 1 die for the bonus. So you roll 3 dice, and they roll 2 dice. You get 10 plus 1 plus 0, which equals 11, and they get 1 plus 0, which equals 1. So you get the highest roll. If you get the highest roll, that enemy army must flee, and one of your adjacent armies must be placed on that space. So the enemy army must flee. If your army flees, you must place it on the table facing backwards. It counts as one of your 6 armies, but it is at sea and it cannot land. If it fled in summer, it can land again in winter. If it fled in winter, it cannot land again. So the enemy army is placed on the table, facing backwards, and one of your adjacent armies must be placed on that space, on the battleground. If you do not get the highest roll, nothing happens. Nothing happens to the attacker. The attacker does not have to flee if they do not get the highest roll. And now I'll tell you about settling. When you settle an army, those Vikings become farmers. They were searching for land to farm, and they found it. To settle, you choose one of your armies on land and you discard it. Why would you do that? Because you earn 1 victory point. And if you had 6 armies, you now have less than 6, so you get to draw 2 armies on your next turn. This is a good thing. So you discard an army, you earn 1 victory point, and on your next turn you have less than 6 armies, so you draw 2 and discard 1. However, when you settle, you could lose control of an objective if the other player has the most armies adjacent to it. You settle in step 3, and then you check for control in step 4. When both players have 0 action points, it's the end of the season. Summer ends and winter begins. When winter begins, each player gets 6 action points. Before that, though, at the end of summer, you get 1 victory point for each objective you control, or 2 points for each bonus objective, as shown on the season board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 points for you. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's 5 points for the other player. You may also get bonus points if your armies are adjacent to their objectives. Plus 1 victory point for armies with circles, plus 1 action point for armies with squares, but only if those armies are adjacent to their objectives. This army has a circle for its bonus, and its objective is woodland, and it's adjacent to woodland, so you get the bonus. The circle is plus 1 victory point, so that's 1 more victory point for you, and that's another one, so you get 2 more victory points. But only because those armies are adjacent to their objectives. The other player gets 1 more victory point for this army, but not for this army. It has a circle, but its objective is marsh, and it's adjacent to a stronghold, not a marsh. So the other player only gets 1 more victory point. By the way, there are 4 types of objectives: grassland, marsh, woodland, and stronghold. But let's get back to army bonuses for now. The square is plus 1 action point. This army is adjacent to its objective, and it has a square, so that's 1 more action point for you, and that's another one. So you get 2 more action points. This army has a square, but it's not adjacent to its objective, so the other player doesn't get that bonus. At the beginning of winter, both players get 6 action points in addition to any bonus action points from summer. If you have armies that fled from battle, turn them around to show that they can land again in winter. And now you're ready for winter. The player who has the fewest victory points gets to choose who takes the first turn in winter. Here, the players are tied, so the player who went first in summer goes first again in winter. Note that it's only if you have fewer than 6 armies that you draw 2 and discard 1. So you always need to count your armies, and that includes your armies at sea, even your armies that fled. Here you have 6 armies, and so you do not draw or discard. But you must always spend 1 or 2 action points on your turn, even if you choose not to do anything else. And even if you don't get to draw an army on your turn, you may be able to land an army. When you land, you choose one of your armies at sea. It does not have to be the army that you drew on that turn. Your armies that fled from battle in summer are already at sea, and they can land again in winter. Then, when both players have 0 action points, winter ends, and you score points again. Then the game ends, and the player with the most victory points is the winner. That's it, you now know how to play a game of BORD. But there are 2 more things I want to show you. The first thing is about movement. You often land an army and then move that same army, but you do not have to. To move, you choose one of your armies on land. It could be this one, or it could be this one. It does not have to be the army that you landed on that turn. So you can land one army and move another army. You move it onto an adjacent space up to 3 times. A space is a half hex, a shore, a whole hex, or the sea. The sea is adjacent to all shores, and all shores are adjacent to the sea. So you can move from shore to sea and then to any other shore. The second thing is about battling. To battle, you choose an enemy army. It does not need to be an army that is adjacent to an army that you just landed or moved. So you can land one army and battle an enemy army on another island if you want. That's it, you now know how to play a game of BORD. But please do read the rulebook for more information. I hope you enjoy BORD, and thanks for watching.